thank you for joining us. You all know Dominique, Kris Gutierrez, Frank Billingsley, and our general manager, Jerry Martin.
How y'all doing?
Good.
Hey, boss.
Yeah.
Hola.
Hi. I guess you don't spend your days on Zoom calls like we do.
Took forever just to unmute myself. Are you kidding?
Yeah. We've been kind of talking informally, but first of all, let's meet everybody here. Danny Allen from Houston. Danny.
Yes, sir. Hi.
Esther Burkett from Porter.
Hi.
Right?
Kara Reyes from Spring.
Hello, everyone.
Hello.
Hi.
Naila Bolden from Stafford.
Hey.
Hey, Niley.
And Shannon Stillwell from Cyprus.
Hi.
Hi, Shannon.
Everybody's here. Thank you all for being here. By the way, there were some people who knew that they weren't going to be able to be a part of the Zoom, so they asked if they could, they did theirs via Facebook, and one of those was Horacio Granero, who sent us a question in on Facebook. He says, yeah, one I've always wondered about, and this is for Dominique or Kris, one I've always wondered about, has your teleprompter ever broken for the whole newscast? How did that go if that actually happened? That's 2 questions, my bad. Anyway.
Strike one.
I know.
Hey, when the teleprompter goes out, it's a big bag. I can tell you that, right, Dominique?
Yeah, I mean, sure. You know, for a normal newscast, you need your teleprompter. In a situation like today, where we had breaking news and breaking weather, you're never going off of the teleprompter. So it just depends on the situation. But when a newscast is completely scripted, and, you know, our producers work from, you know, morning till night crafting these shows, and they are, I mean, it's really kind of a miracle when a newscast goes off without a hitch, when you think about all the elements that are involved. And then if you lose a teleprompter, it just, all of it just goes by the wayside. I mean, you've had to chunk all of that effort and just try to get yourself through the 30 minutes.
Right.
You know what else is even more interesting with people working from home now? We have people, some of our producers working remotely, so that makes it even more special. So
yeah, we've joked that they're, you know, in the bar while they're producing.
Yeah. Hey, we had Diane Harris Bowers for Dominique. Favorite story you've reported on?
Wow.
It's only been a couple.
Yeah, only a couple. I mean, there are so many memorable stories and amazing opportunities, from Olympics to presidents, you know, inaugurations. I've done 2, but I have to say the coolest thing I ever did was I had just started at Channel 2 and I was anchoring in the mornings, and they sent me to Hollywood to do a series called Assignment Hollywood. And that was back when you had Friends, Frasier, Wings on the air, ER. So, I mean, that was sort of the heyday of NBC programming. And so they gave us full access behind the scenes to all of these reporters and the shows and how everything was put together. And my photographer, Sherry Presley, and I came back with 27 beta tapes. And I mean, we were just loaded down. And I lived in an edit bay after I would anchor the morning in the new news, and I would log all those tapes. But I got to put together 7 different stories about all of these different shows. And it was fun. It was really fun. And, you know, back then we could do 3-minute, 4-minute stories. So it was an incredible creative outlet for me as well, writing a long package like that and really having fun with it. So that would probably be the most memorable.
Kris, what was your most memorable story?
Khambrel, when I think of memories, you know, my time as a network correspondent, I had a front row seat to history being made, right? And so I would travel from one story to the next. All the major stories. I covered every hurricane on the ground between 2007 and 2012. I got to parachute down into Houston even though I was working up in Dallas at the time to cover Hurricane Harvey, Ike, and things like that. But when I think of memorable stories and the ones that, you know, I like to, you know, brag about with my kids, flying with the Blue Angels wasn't that bad. I did not pass out, if you're wondering. I did not pass out. I did everything they told me to. We broke the sound barrier over the Gulf of Mexico. And we pulled like 7 Gs, something like that. It was crazy. So, you know, I think back to the shot that we got up on top of the Channel 2 studios and the Blue Angels flying past our tower. And for me to, you know, think back of that memory that I got to be in one of those jets and to experience that, the lifetime memory. I mean, it's something that I'll never forget.
At the risk of turning this into a half-hour question answer, Frank, any memorable storm that you've covered that sticks out for you?
Well, I remember when Dominique had her walk-on part on Wings when she was out at NBC.
Remember the hair? Remember? That's all you could see.
That's all
This
you
big
could
poof of red hair.
You know, I remember a lot, but I remember Allison, and it was a Friday night, and I actually had on a pink tie because I was supposed to go to a gala that evening over by the Astrodome, and I went into the news director's office. And I said, I don't think anybody's going to go anywhere. And I watched rain for 12 hours fall at the rate of 3 inches per hour. For 12 hours. It's 36 inches of rain. And that was Allison. And until Harvey came along, and then that was 6 inches of rain per hour.
Yeah, yeah.
For 10 hours, there was nothing like it. I mean, it's just overwhelming. I mean, you know, you can say, well, I remember snow and ice, and you go, wow, that's amazing for Houston. And it is. But when you see the unleashing of Mother Nature like that, that's pretty memorable. It's,
yeah.
Of course, Ike was a huge storm for us too. And watching Galveston and Bolivar, you know, when I was in the helicopter and we didn't know what everything was going to look like. And we flew over Bolivar. There was nothing there. There was nothing there. It's like, first of all, it's so sad and shocking, but then it's like, where did everything go? Where did it all go? Which it went onto the bay, and then it went around to Smith Point. But so we found it eventually, 27-foot tall debris wall over at Smith Point. But, you know, and when I mean everything, I mean the houses and what's in them, refrigerators and sofas and clothes and toys, and it was all gone, every bit of it. I don't think I've ever, I mean, it was a war zone like I've never seen. So, I mean, you're right. I can turn this into an hour and a half.
And you and I have had those discussions in the weather office too, so I get that as well. I was covering Hurricane Andrew in Miami. I was a sports director at the station at that time, and our main anchors were out of town, and that's when I made the transition from sports to news. We were on the air when Andrew knocked our tower down, and so they said, "You did a good job. Would you like to go to news?" I said, "Yep, let's do it." So I became the primary anchor there in Miami for a number of years. So storms have been a part of that. Thank you guys for all of that. I appreciate it. Steve Nelson says he has a question here. Just one time, can Khambrel wear a normal tie?
Nope.
Nope. Nope. Horse is out of the barn. We're done now. Jared, you remember when you came? Jared, you remember when you first came to me and after I wore a bow tie on the air and you came to me and said, "What is that all about?" Do you remember that conversation?
Yeah, I do. I just wondered if you were going to do it all the time. Then
yeah. No, the way you said it was, "Hey, you're not going to do that all the time, are you?"
A leading question.
Bow ties.
And I said, "Well, I don't know."
That's after Frank. I had to tell Frank stop tucking in his tie in his he used to tuck it in.
Yeah, it keeps up with doing that. So I go in there and it's like that.
So the meteorologists at a station, you always have to worry about what they wear because they're always a little different than the other people.
What do you mean by that? What do you mean? A little different. What does that mean? We got all the talent, the reporters, the wacky people we have, and you jump on the meteorologist. Okay. Hey, so one of the questions for you, Jared, I think we've already answered that because Tex is at your house there, so we know that Tex lives with you. Somebody asked you that sometimes the KPRC seem to be biased during political campaigns. For example, that one of the viewers asked that question about that because you don't cover maybe all the opponents the same, and you have a certain response to that, I'm sure, because I know that's not to be the case.
No, I mean we gotta, ever since, and I'm not, getting political here, but ever since the fake news really got out there, a lot of people ascribe, if you do a story and it seems like it favored, even though it's factual, it seems to favor one side or the other, that it's a politically biased report, and that's how we do all our reporting. And I could tell you, that's never going to happen. If we do see any bias, Dave Strickland, the news director, gets a note from me in a second. I probably only had to do that like once. Well, what happens at a campaign if Cruz is going for Senate and he's in San Antonio and Beto is in Houston? Well, we do the Beto story because he's in Houston. That's the market we cover. And when Cruz comes to Houston, we cover his appearance here. So, it all sort of evens out in the end. But on one particular day, you can probably take that tact and say, well, we didn't cover Cruz in San Antonio, we covered Beto. So therefore we're, and we always get thrown into the bus with MSNBC because
right.
We're associated with NBC. And Kris has worked for both Fox and so have I, for Fox and NBC, the NBC affiliate. And you just have to be a journalist. And not that I'm a journalist, but you just have to be unbiased. And you go by facts.
Gary, can I dovetail on that?
Sure.
Because it's such an important question. And I think it's really important to our viewers that being balanced and being objective. And to me, that's what the news media is supposed to be, objective in its reporting.
Right.
And so I will say as a news anchor, and we are on the front lines and we own our copy. We co-write it and we're the last ones to touch it, basically. So whenever there's a political story, I am adamant about it feeling balanced. And so to what Jerry said, for instance, if you have Beto in Houston, and so you have a local reporter on that story, well, what I want to see is maybe a soundbite from Cruz. And if we don't have access to a soundbite, then I want to hear verbatim what he said so that we can respond with a Cruz statement. And so that way in a story, even though you may have a local reporter covering one candidate, you still have a comment and a position from the other candidate to balance that story out. And that's where the balance lies, in making sure that both voices are heard in the story. And that's super important to me.
What happens is along the way, depending on the lens through which the viewer is watching, no matter what you do, they're going to say, well, you're biased toward my guy. So, but you're right. You have to bend over backwards to try to do what you can to be as balanced as you can.
Yeah.
So,
but a lot of times for time, just so people know, if we know Cruz is coming into Houston the next week, we probably won't do that because we've got Houston's such a big town. There's so many stories to do. We'll just move on and we'll do Cruz when he comes to Houston, and that's the balance. But
any of our viewers here, do you see anything did you see that may seem to be unbalanced from time to time, or do you think that the local news does a pretty good job of being balanced?
I think that's one of the reasons why our family watches Channel 2 and has for many years, is because we see the professionalism. We see that you guys aren't slanted one way or the other. I happen to see that you guys do, I think, an excellent job of covering both sides. I don't see that you're slanted one way or the other. And I think that's what keeps us watching year after year after year. I've been watching you guys since I moved here in 1979, and I was little back then. So I'm almost 50 this year. So,
welcome to the club.
Yay. But yeah, I think, as a viewer, I think we watch you guys because of the fact that you guys are so, balanced with everything that you report.
That's great. That's good to hear. Anybody else have a comment before we move on? Okay. Hey, Danny, why don't you ask your question, sir?
I would want to ask, like Dominique, for instance, well, all of you guys are in homes, every day and every night, and you're considered, local celebrities. And I know Dominique has over 1 million YouTube subscribers. So my question would be, how do you guys stay grounded and, approachable?
That's a great question. And I'm glad you asked that. And I can just give you my perspective, but I think it's probably shared by all the on-air people on this platform right now. And that is, in my opinion, it's not about me, it's about the viewer. It's about the viewer. So when you always keep that in perspective, whether you're a journalist or a YouTuber or whatever it is, the reason why you're there is solely because a viewer chose to invite you into their home. And that to me is a gift. And it's not something that is taken lightly. And so I think that not only plants my feet on the ground, but it also makes my roots go really, really deep. And I have the utmost respect for the viewer, and their opinion matters. And I'm grateful for each and every one of them on whatever platform I'm on. And so that, to me, it's not about celebrity. It's not about look at me. It's about what can I do to better your life? How can I be a better communicator? How can I serve you better in my community or on whatever platform and whoever I'm targeting? So that's always my mindset, to answer your question.
Hey, Frank Billingsley, other than your private chauffeur you get every day to work, how do you stay grounded?
Well, he's also my psychiatrist. No.
I know her. She's good.
You take the job seriously, but you can't take yourself too seriously. I think that's part of it. And I mean, you're probably getting that feeling right now that we like to have fun. We have family lives just like everybody else. And we enjoy what we do. And we've also had the privilege of meeting a lot of really big celebrities. And you realize how small you are when you meet somebody. You're like, oh my gosh, I get nervous when I meet some of these people because they,
Exactly.
the building. They used to come through the buildings a lot back in the 80s and 90s because you didn't have this instant satellite. They would have to come to the actual buildings to I met Aldo Cella. Remember Aldo Cella, the wine guy?
Oh yeah.
I'll never forget him. But when you never get a second chance to make a first impression. And so you want that person, just like I remember Aldo Cella being a great guy. And that's my impression, the only one I've ever had. So I want people, when they meet me, to have that first impression and go away with that. And I don't want to be a bad one.
Right. Kris?
Khambrel, when I think about it, like Dominique said, it's about the viewer, but I'd also add it's about the product. And I know working with Dominique in the past and knowing Frank and working with him and even you, Khambrel, in the past, I realized where your hearts are and mine's in the same place. And I think the moment that we start to think of ourselves as celebrities or doing something that's a little more special than others, I think we're going down the wrong road. I'm a real simple guy. I mean, I grew up in Dallas, Texas. I wear boots with my suits and I come to work just every day like you do at your job. And I just try to do my job with excellence. And so that keeps me grounded. Plus I have a 9-year-old. That's it. Boots and boots, man. That's me. And so, I take my job seriously. I think it's a blessing to be working, not just at Channel 2, but in this market in Houston and being a part of everything that's going on here. And that to me is enough motivation to keep me grounded. Plus I've got a wife at home. And if I come home thinking I'm somebody special, guess what? She's gonna take the trash out. So I mean that's it. I mean it's real easy, my man.
We always have those people at home that kind of help us know which way they're right. Hey, so remind the folks who are here who remember you. Now, what years were you here before? You were here as a reporter then, were you not? 2003
until 2007, I worked on. Remember when we called it the Night Beat? KPRC Channel 2
Houston Night Beat.
Yeah, exactly.
News to Houston Night Beat, yeah.
News to Houston Night Beat, baby. So that was from late 03 to early 07. I was a nightside reporter here at Channel 2, fill and anchor. Yep.
Right. So that's about the time that I was making the transition from, I guess I was doing mornings and afternoons. D, we were doing the 4. We just did a 1 hour 4.
Were we doing the noon 4 and 5?
Originally, yeah, but then when I went to mornings, then I started doing the mornings, and then I came back
you left me.
1 hour news. Yeah. So, what?
Khambrel, can I jump in for a second?
Yeah.
So what you might not know is Kris married a Houstonian, and she was an intern. Supposedly.
Oh, here we go. Here we go.
Wait, Jerry, it goes even before that. Before
she
was a KPRC
I'll let Dominique
intern.
tell the story.
Yeah,
Okay.
Dominique, you tell the story.
It's really a cool story. Okay, so Crystal was in high school and she reached out to me and she was really, really interested in this business. And so she sent me an email and said, hey, my name is Crystal and I really want to learn about journalism and I would love it if I could come shadow with you for a day. So she comes up to the station and I meet her and she is just bright-eyed, bushy-tailed, just so excited, so many questions. So what started as a day turned into weeks, turned into, I think, a month. She could come up here and hang out with me as long and as often as she wanted. I just fell in love with her. So then she goes off to college, and then when she's in college, she does her internship here at Channel 2, and then she meets Kris Gutierrez. And
That's
it was
right.
all over from there.
So I blame Dominique. Anytime I come in here with a bad attitude, I blame Dominique. Here, the story gets a little bit better, and I'll explain. So it was Crystal's first day at her internship here at Channel 2, and I'm sitting at my desk, and she comes over to my desk, and I've got Phil Archer sitting behind me, Ryan Korsgaard sitting across from me, and Mary Benton is sitting next to me. And she comes over in a crowd of seasoned journalists, and she says, "Kris, may I go out with you?" And I said, whoa, whoa, whoa. You're moving really fast here. And she caught herself. And I mean, on a story. Can I go out on a story with you? And we all laughed, and we joked about it, and we gave her a hard time. And she went on that story with me that night. And I could tell she was somebody really, really special. But for the record, I did not ask her for her phone number until I knew her internship was completely over.
Okay.
I promise you.
That's good to know, because I wasn't in charge of the intern program then, but I am now, so I would have had to call you on the
This
carpet.
never would have happened today.
Hey,
Yeah, you're right.
Thank you, Danny, for getting that started. Esther from Porter, you have a question for everybody?
I do have a question, and I was thinking about Frank when I did this question, because one of the most memorable things I remember as a viewer was Frank in that helicopter after Ike had hit. And, you know, growing up in Houston, you know, through Alicia, Ike really scared all of us. And my question is, during difficult news stories and something live like that in the helicopter, how do you keep your emotions in check and separate from your story as it's unfolding?
Yeah. Well, it's not easy because, you know, I've had property in Galveston since 2000. So I'm not a born on the island. I'm bought on the island and built on the island. so I'm a BOI in my own right. So the emotions are there, but I think just like any time you're faced with an opportunity to communicate a tragedy to someone, you know the seriousness of it and you know how to put yourself in check. We've all had to call people and tell them something unfortunate. And you know, and if you're a mature person, then you know how to control the crisis and say, this is what's happened. Because my philosophy is it's always better to know the devil. And whatever that devil is, and when it's a hurricane or the destruction of that hurricane, it's more important that people know exactly what's going on. And you just have to divorce yourself from what it means to you personally. Because it was heartbreaking. I mean, I saw those phone poles and I saw people's roofs gone, and I know what it meant to them. And I could tell from that helicopter, it was going to be a ways to go to get back to where we were going. It was really interesting. We wanted to go up. Ike hit on Saturday morning early, and the government wouldn't let anybody go down there. So all these rumors started. Why won't they let us go to Galveston? Is Galveston gone? Are there a bunch of dead people in Galveston? What's going on? We couldn't figure out. Sunday, we couldn't go on Sunday. So the rumors got worse. Then on Monday, they would let us go, but they wouldn't let us go to the West End. So we went up, and my helicopter pilot, who was our helicopter pilot solely at the time, he knew people at Tracon, which is like the control tower that controls the Houston air traffic. And he said, can we go to the West End yet? And he said, sure. So we went, and we're showing all these people what's going on in the West End. And the other TV stations are like, you're not supposed to be down there. You're not supposed to be down there. We're here. So we saw it. And while I was up there, an email blew up. You happened to see my house at the corner of this street, and my part, and everybody wanted to know about their place. So I told my news director at the time, we got to go back up. And we have to figure out some system of telling people we're going to be live in the air. You direct us to show us where your house is. We'll show you what it looks like. And at that point, you think, you know, the civic duty so overpowers any personal emotion that you have. You really start focusing on, this is what I have to do. This is what I need to do. And this is why I'm here. And I was the one that was able to do it. And so you just do it.
Isn't it like a doctor who has to tell bad news. You focus, and the doctor, when they go home at the end of the day, they're regular people. I mean, just like everybody else. Dominique and Kris said, when you, same sort of scenario, question to you from Esther in terms of how you keep your feelings in check as you deal with those stories that are so impactful for so many people, can be gut-wrenching too.
Yeah, Khambrel, you're right. And for me, anything that involves, children or animals really, really gets me.
Yeah.
So, for instance, the Andrea Yates story was probably the most difficult that I've had to cover in terms of my emotionality. And it's hard because and I think it's because you're in the middle of a job and you know that it's almost as if this override takes place, and that intellectual part of you that has to kind of get you through the job takes over, and then all of a sudden after that, and you sit back and you process, that's sort of when you deal with those feelings, when you really have a chance to deal. And it usually comes when you come home, you talk to your spouse, and your mind kind of goes around all of those different scenarios and what it must have been like and felt like and what would lead a person to do that. That's when those feelings really come out. And I'm grateful that somehow the brain compartmentalizes things so that it's not a flood of feeling. I mean, but here's the other thing too. You can't be so stone-faced and so hard that you're not connected to the story, because that's wrong too. You have to feel what the viewer is feeling, but you still have to be professional in the moment. So there's a really interesting and fine line that's walked there.
Yeah, and to piggyback off that, I think that, we do have a job to do, and we do need to maintain that professional composure. But at the end of the day, you have to release it. I pray about things a lot. Crystal, my wife, and I, we pray about things a lot. And, I have the good fortune of my wife is in the business as well. And so she gets it. She understands it. We talk about it. Dominique, sit across from each other in the newsroom. We talk about stories a lot as we put, newscasts and things together. But you do have to release that emotion, because you can't let it fester inside you, because you'll go crazy, because we are human. We have all the emotions that you have, Esther. And so I think that's a really, really good question. And hopefully that's just a little more insight for you.
Yeah, there have been psychologists who talk about news people having PTSD because of the kinds of stories that are covered on a regular basis, and it does take its toll after a period of time. Good answers, everybody. Hey, Kara, your question.
Okay, so this one is for Jerry. Hi, Jerry.
Hi, Kara. How you doing?
Make it a hard question. Make it a hard question.
Yeah.
Don't let him off the hook.
Softballs.
Okay, so here it goes. Boxers or briefs? No, that's not the question, Jerry.
I thought you said this was a vetted conversation.
Oh my gosh.
I don't need to know.
No, that's not the question.
Not tight whitey.
Thank God.
Speechless. I've never seen
Thank God. Khambrel said, thank God.
Who picked these viewers?
Sorry, Mariah. So my question is just from the standpoint of your position as general manager. I mean, it's obvious there's so much chemistry between the news crews on all the different hours. Because I watch morning, well, now I'm watching practically 24 hours as long as you're on, because I'm home. And it's really great, the combination of those that are sitting at the desk and those out in the field. And how do you, what are the top 3, and maybe it's just 2, characteristics you look for when you're bringing someone on board, and how are they going to mesh with the team? Because you have a very established team. There's a lot of tenure there. I mean, especially, this team here. And so what do you look for?
I look for range, for people that can do, a story, the Texans winning the Super Bowl, and also, reporting on a assassination attempt on a president or something like that, so that they can do both ends of the extreme and in the middle within their storytelling and how they're reading the news. So I look for range. They have to be very curious about the place that they live and news in general, just be great sense of curiosity, I think, is very important, because if all they're doing is reading a teleprompter, the viewer will see it immediately. There's a lot of people. I get a lot of young people that they get thrown into a small market. You're 23 years old. They get thrown on an anchor desk and they read the news, and they read it fine, but they don't really deliver the news and communicate the news the way, someone that has lived a little bit of life can read the news. There's only a few people I've ever seen in my life that right out of college could do it. Brian Gumbel's one of them. And I hate to even use the name because he's a controversial figure now, but Matt Lauer was another one.
Yeah.
I worked with Matt right out of college, and he could deliver the day he got out of college. But there's very few people that can do that. They have to get some work and grow up and just live a little bit of life so that they can communicate that to the viewer. It's very helpful. So that and energy. I think I think you need all those items.
Yes.
So I think if you look at our staffs, it's generally filled with those people.
It really is. It's a fun group. All the different hours and times of day, it's a really fun group. And what you said about those that don't have the passion for the city and wanting to learn it, you really can see it in their face when they're reporting. It's so true. I've seen that.
Mm-hmm. And then, if you look at Frank is one of the best in the business. Dominique might have just read an awful story and we have to go to weather, and somehow Frank changes the tune and Dominique goes right with it, and it just gets you, it's a great transition. It does the same with Kris, obviously, too, but it's an important thing to do, because sometimes the news is so damn serious that we don't want to be,
You have to have levity. There are moments of levity, but it has to be the right moment. And that's where that wisdom that you're talking about, Jared, and that finesse happens, is knowing when to let up, when to be serious, how to transition. These are nuances and things that come with time on the job and experience.
Right.
And Jared, can you tell when you meet somebody, when I first got to Channel 2 20 years ago, one of the things that the general manager at the time said, we have a no jerk rule. Now, we don't want jerks on our staff, in terms of attitude and personality and whatnot. You can pretty much tell, can't you, when you meet somebody, if they're just a prima donna or somebody like that who might not fit in, as opposed to somebody who's a solid journalist, but who's also professional and can work with others?
Yeah, generally speaking, I kind of, in organizations, I have, it's okay to have one knucklehead. I just can't have two. If everybody knows who the knucklehead is, then everybody can. That's why NFL teams live. They have a prima donna receiver. If he's the only knucklehead on the team, it works fine. No one cares. But if you get two of those people, it becomes a big problem. So I sort of have a one knucklehead rule.
I'm trying to figure out who that is.
Who's our knucklehead?
I'm trying to figure that out too. Who is the knucklehead? I got a lot of candidates. That's our next thing. So, see what you did, Kara? Now we're going to be it's the knucklehead thing. Now we're going to figure that out.
I love knuckleheads.
No. But thank you for that, and thank you for your response, Jerry. Naila from Stanford, what's your question?
Yes, my question is, how do you guys deal with the fans? And when I mean that, I sometimes look at comments on social media. People can be a little harsh and take that kind of thing personal. And how do you keep yourself safe when you're out in the community with your families, etc.?
Good question. Who do you want to start with that one?
You're in.
I'm in. I'm the chosen one. Okay, so Jerry has his no knucklehead policy. Well, one knucklehead policy. So I guess I allow one knucklehead per comment thread. But my feeling is that there's a fine line, and just because I'm a public figure doesn't give people the right to berate me or accuse me of things. Do you know what I'm saying? There's a fine personal line, and you know, if you don't like my work, you can say you don't like my work. But when people start attacking you personally or kind of crossing that barrier, I have a delete policy and I don't reply. I don't need that type of a person on my platform. And I feel fortunate that this rarely happens, which is great. But I won't allow that. To me, that's toxic. And just because I'm a public figure, it doesn't mean that I should allow that kind of commentary into my life. So I'll just simply delete if somebody crosses the line in that respect. The other thing that I've learned over time is the mentality of just kill them with kindness. You know, if somebody doesn't like something, my response is always, you know, thank you for taking the time to write in, to email. I understand your point of view. You know, and if you acknowledge their feelings, it's amazing what happens, because suddenly they write back and they'll say, oh, well, I didn't mean it that way. And what I meant to say was, and I really do like you and watch you, but it was just that one story. And so, you know, if you just reply and you do so in a kind-hearted way and just acknowledge and do it with respect, it's amazing what you get back in return. So that's always been my approach, is just to be kind and be respectful. And that applies whether it's an email, whether it's a comment on social media, whether if I'm out to dinner with my husband and somebody comes up to me and wants to say hello. You know, there's always time and a place for that. That to me is a part of what we do.
Yeah. Kris?
Yeah, I'd agree with that, Dominique. And I think that, you know, my wife, I think it hurts her more when she reads that stuff, because I just let it, you know, kind of roll off my back. And I do the same thing. I think people are really surprised when we do respond, frankly, because maybe they don't think we read it. But just so you know, when Jerry gets an email, or Dave Strickland, our news director, gets an email that pertains to us, they pass those along and give us the freedom to respond to those. So I appreciate that. But if it's on social media, what you have to remember is that everyone on this Zoom call right now that I work with here at Channel 2, our careers began long before Facebook, long before Twitter, Instagram, Snapchat, and whatever TikTok is, right? And so I think that, you know, we're all kind of learning how to navigate these new waters as we go. But again, for my wife, it really affects her more, because she knows the type of person that I am. And my colleagues here know what type of person I am. And so that really, really gets to her. But at the end of the day, again, we just release that. We pray about it, and we realize that, you know, everything that we do, not everyone's going to like us, whether we like it or not. And that's really unfortunate. But if you just give us a chance to explain why something was done the way we did it, I think you'd understand.
Hey, Frank, you weather people are always getting it wrong. What the heck?
Always wrong.
Can you respond to that? You know,
Yeah. Fortunately, no one ever criticizes me. So,
This is perfect.
you know, it's been so many years now. I've been in this UK for 40 years almost for me. And so I remember getting letters, you know, from people that didn't like what we were doing. And you try to write them back. Now it's a lot easier to respond to criticism. All you have to do is email them back. And Dominique's right. As long as they get a reply, that usually starts a much more tame conversation. I think in today's world, people can sort of go off a little bit. Just if you know, they just type it really quick and they hit send and then they regret it. So if you respond in a nice way and try to explain what's going on, then they're pretty good about that. And Kris, you're right. I'll never forget 10 years ago. Someone came up to me and said, and started talking to me, and they said, "Can I take a selfie?" I said, "What?"
What's that?
What are you going to do with this selfie? Oh, I'm going to put it on Facebook. I said,
Facebook, yeah.
Now, I mean, you just got to assume anyone that takes a picture. I don't think anyone's asked me for an autograph in 9 years.
Right.
What's that? And me too. Well, you know, I always take a selfie now with people too. So that world has certainly changed. I'm fortunate in that I've really never been harassed in public. I mean, I know most people, I think, are a little surprised when they recognize you, and they're like, they're so shocked by the fact they're seeing you, then that sort of erases anything mean that they had to say. And, you know, when they see you in person and you smile at them and say hello, they're calm. Most people are are like road rage. It's just that 1 second. And then if you wave at them, you know, they're fine. You cut them off. They go, oh, thank you. They're okay. You know. So hopefully most people are like that. But
kill them with kindness. Kill them with kindness.
That's
that
it.
seems to work
Always.
across the board.
Yep.
Thank you, Naila, for that. Shannon, what's your question this evening?
Hi. I have been watching for years and years since I was young. And I actually used to listen to Dominique on the radio years ago. And I used
At Mix?
Yes. Yes, when I was younger. And we're close to the same age. But
Right.
I remember emailing you years ago, and because I wanted to be a broadcast journalist, and I actually worked at a small newspaper and a small radio station for years. And I remember you emailed me right back, and you were really, really kind to me. And so this was years ago. And I've always watched you because I just think you're so relatable and so kind. So thank you. But my question is, I kind of like behind the scenes stuff. So I follow a lot of y'all on social media. I like to see the behind the scenes. So I was curious if you had like a funny story or some kind of, you know, like day in the life type of funny behind the scenes story you could share with me.
I do. I have a very funny story to share that's going to bring me back to my morning show days and Houston weather. So I would arrive at the station. This was when our morning show started at 5 a.m. So I was on the road at 4 o'clock in the morning, and it had rained overnight. And I was driving down Gessner, and there's nobody on the road at 4 o'clock in the morning, so you can't quite gauge how high the water is. So I'm driving, and I'm in like a Ford Probe. It was a red Ford Probe, and it was a low to the ground car. And I'm driving, and suddenly the water's getting higher and higher, and I thought, oh shoot. And right when I said that, my engine died. So I called the station, and I'm half a mile from the station, the Gessner Beach Nut. And they said, well, there's flooding everywhere, and all of our crews are out. We don't have anybody to come pick you up, but hold on, we'll figure it out. Well, literally 20 minutes later, a fire truck full of guys shows up, and I can't open my door because of the pressure from the water. So I roll down my window, and they pluck me, and they're pulling me out of my car to get me on the fire truck. And the skirt that I was wearing ripped all the way up to my tush. And I'm wearing these big rollers in my hair, and I am mortified. I am mortified. I am now on a fire truck with a skirt ripped up to my rear end and big rollers. And I'm thinking, thank God there's no social media.
Oh my God.
I literally got to the station 5 minutes before airtime, brushed out my hair, sat down, and I stayed on that seat until I could go home and change my clothes. That's my crazy story.
Yeah, top that, Kris.
Oh man, where do I go with that? In my mind, I'm just trying to think of how we can find those firefighters and retell that story on it.
Oh, I know.
That's what I'm thinking.
That would be fantastic.
Oh man, behind the scenes craziness. I'm trying to think. Dominique, why don't we talk about the night that I left the governor's mansion? And you probably know the timing better than I do, but I was on the road because we wrapped up our hour-long 6 o'clock live from Austin. Yeah. And I needed to be back in studio in time for the 10 o'clock. And I remember I was at the Beltway and I-10 coming in from Austin was like 10 till, Dominique? I'm trying to remember.
No, it was 8 till. And if you wouldn't have stopped at Buc-ee's, you would have made it.
Hey, those beaver nuggets got me. The beaver
nuggets did you in. But it's so funny because I'm thinking, I'm going to be solo anchoring this newscast tonight. And Steve, our executive producer, said, he said 9:47 or whatever. And sure enough, on the clock, there you were. And you came in, you kind of got your makeup going, you wired up and sat down, and literally,
we pulled it off.
Pulled it off.
Nice.
Frank, you got anything behind the scenes?
Well, I can tell you this is a true story. I had only been a weatherman, and I didn't really know much about weather when I first started, right? And this was 1982, and that was September of 82. And so I just started September 22nd, 1982. And I went home on that Saturday in November. And I had forecast a beautiful day for Sunday. It's going to be cold and clear. And I woke up and had 6 inches of snow on the ground. I literally called my news director. I just called him and said, I quit. I don't know. I know you're going to fire me, so I'll just quit. And he said, you know what? I'm not going to fire you because you're just learning. You can't always get it right. And so that was a long time ago. We would never get such a forecast wrong today.
That's pretty good.
That was a long story. That was a long time ago, and just guessing, and oh my gosh. But 6 inches of snow on the ground. And then my news director actually had to drive over to get me to work that Sunday because I didn't know how to drive in the snow.
Oh my gosh.
That's a good one.
He was a great guy.
I don't think I've ever heard that one, Frank. That's good. I never thought you ever busted a forecast. That's the first for me. We have time. We have about 10 minutes left, so I want to give everybody a chance to go ahead and ask some more questions here. If I can start, you can just chime in. If you, Mariah, you can see them. If they have a question they want to follow up on, we can do that, and you can pick, because I can't see everybody. But